I'm ready for questions since we just visited a couple days. I tried to get a Notre Dame's hat, I couldn't get it in. I was within a week, I was close, wasn't I? Yeah. I know when it happened, you were sitting at home getting ready to watch. What's that show you watch? You watch that reality show, the coaching show. Somebody told me you watch that coaching show on Netflix. Ted Lasso.
That's not reality.
No. Well, I've never seen it. I've never seen it, so.
You should. You should watch it.
I don't have to watch TV, but when it came across, first thing that hit your mind was, you know what? He was right. It was almost exactly 1 week. So,
Well, what do you think about the 3 new now that you've added?
I think it's all good. There's security in numbers. You know, we talked about it. I'm sure that Chad probably, he knows a lot more about it than I do, other than when it's going to happen. The numbers is strength, and how they're going to break it up, who's going to play who. I think that's the challenge, but that's a good challenge to have. You know, when you look back and from where we were a year and a half ago. I mean, all of this is somewhat unsettling, right? So there's a lot of history and a lot of tradition that's being crumbled, but it is what it is. So now you just move forward and, you know, try to make the best out of it. I was visiting with somebody last night, so who plays in the Rose Bowl?
It's going away anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna be part of the playoffs, so.
But to a certain extent, to not have a Pac and a Big Ten team's gonna feel a little bit weird, right? You know, it always is at 4 o'clock, cause you watch the certain games, you eat, and then you get to watch that game, unless you play good that year, then you're playing on that day and you don't get to do that. But otherwise, it's kind of tradition, and it'd be like playing that game at 11 a.m. or something. You know, it just wouldn't be the same, but, so, they're good additions. You know, we talked about this, I think a little bit the other day. Arizona and Arizona State have the same board of regents anyway. So, you know, I don't know anything about it, but I don't know how they could be in that meeting and think, okay, it's good for them, but not for them. So, and then obviously Utah's a really good program. You know, I think they're very well coached, and they play over their head and win games that people shouldn't think that they would win, and have done it consistently. He's been there the same amount of time I have, and so he's got a tradition there, and they play really well based on him being there so long, and they kind of know what they're trying to get accomplished, so.
I know this is fresh, but now that it's gonna be 16 teams, scheduling's gonna be interesting. Are you a fan of 8-team divisions, play everybody and then have maybe a 1 or 2 from the other, or would you prefer a 4-4-4-4?
So that's one of the things that I haven't had a discussion about with the most innovative commissioner in all of sports. And I look forward to having a talk with him about that, because I want to hear what he has to say. Because I think there's so many possibilities, and there's a lot of pros and cons with both possibilities. We would like to establish something and have to start, you're trying to accomplish multiple things. You'd like for it to be somewhat geographical for travel for the fans and the student athletes. You'd like to create rivalries somehow, but you also don't want to get locked into 2 teams playing each other so much that now you go back to, well, how do we know who's best, because I never played this team in 4 years. So I think there's a real challenge there, but it's a good challenge.
Coach, would you be in favor of replacing a non-conference game potentially with, let's say, 4 divisions and having a playoff to get to the championship game? You know what I'm saying? Would you be in favor of something like that?
I think it's gonna be more challenging to get in the playoffs as we speak now with the teams that we have in this league, and you're building it up. So you could have more 7-win teams than you do 9 or 10-win teams in this league now. And ultimately, I'm gonna guess the other coaches and players wanna win the conference, and then they wanna make the playoffs. So we have to be careful about the position we put ourselves in that could minimize those opportunities.
Does Utah change the dynamic of the balance of power? They won Pac-12 twice in a row. We talked about all the parity, nothing against Arizona State, Colorado, but they hadn't been successful. Utah has at a big time level.
Lately, they've been very
successful.
successful.
Did they change the power structure in any way?
Well, that's one of the things we're talking about. So you're putting a team in, and I haven't done my research on where they have finished over a period of, let's just say, 10 years, because 10 years is a pretty good way to, it's a pretty good barometer for an organization and a coach, because most coaches don't make it 10 years. And with where he's been, I know there's a lot of graphics come out on wins and bowl wins and different things and years in bowls, because people text them to my phone. And it seems like Utah's always in that list of 10 or 12 or 15 teams. So they're bringing in a really good team, and they're one of those teams that, and I think Oklahoma State is this way, that if you polled coaches anonymously across the country, teams that you would really not want to play because it's hard enough to play and beat them, and you might not get the credibility that you think you're going to get from a national, from the exposure, just based on history. Utah is one of those teams, because I've watched them before in the last couple years to study some of the things they're doing. I watched some of the stuff they did on offense last year, and they're a very physical team, and as I said earlier, they're well coached, and he's done it for a duration. So it'd be very challenging for somebody to argue or debate that, you know, he's not a really, really good football coach and has had a lot of success based on his history.
8 times in the last 10 years, they won at least 9 games.
Right, so 8 out of the last 10 years, they've won 9.
At least 9, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think that aren't we 7 of 10 or something, or I don't know, double-digit wins here, something like that, because people send it to my phone.
7
So
of
they're-
10, sorry, I counted wrong.
Yeah,
But
well, that
still.
can happen, yeah, you watch too much Ted Lasso. But the point being is,
Math is-
there's I guess really to answer Barry's question, if you summarize it with a success for an extended period of time, over 10 years, then you're probably playing a pretty good team.
You said something interesting just now about,
Where have you been?
you really wanna know?
Yeah, been all right?
Yeah, I've been all right.
Okay.
We'll have a talk.
All right.
I'd like to know where and how you've been.
Well, you know where I am. Everybody knows.
Well, how
where I
have you
am.
been? You been good?
I've been good.
Did you
yeah.
miss me?
Yeah. Getting ready to be empty nesting. My last son's going off, and so yeah, I'm doing good. But I just hadn't seen you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Good. What do you got?
You just said something about there being a potential logjam of 7 and 5, 8 and 4 teams. I mean, there's already parity as it stands. You just said the other day, I don't know who's gonna win the league. No one does, right? Well, it's interesting. Everyone looks at the 12-team playoff and thinks, well, that automatically opens the door for more opportunity. And what you're saying is right, in that if you expand too heavy, potentially, in a conference and you have too much parity, it's like a law of unintended consequences here. Are you worried? Well, the question is, are you worried that there are some unintended consequences that people aren't thinking about when it comes to this stuff?
Well, they're not thinking about that at all. What they're thinking about is money.
Right, of course.
So we can get that established. We all know that. We talked about that 2 years ago. That's why we're in this situation. That's just a fact. But the thing that is interesting is that they're for the fans, and for just the college football junkie, the way it's falling is gonna be really good, because there's gonna be a lot of parity, more so than ever, in my opinion, the way this is falling. And it's gonna be more difficult, if you're not careful, to get in the playoffs because of it. And as this conference realignment's gonna settle for a while, but it could move again, and it could move to an NFL system real fast, because we could run into some complications with travel, financial, and student athletes maybe not wanting to do so much traveling. So we could get into more of an NFL concept with local divisions somehow. Could happen real fast. And with that, there's gonna be a lot of parity and competition. And David asked a good question about how many games do you play now in conference? If you could get a bipartisan agreement amongst the conferences that are, you know, which now would be, I mean, no disrespect, but it would be the Big 12, the Big 10, ACC, and the SEC, right? If they could get a bipartisan agreement that we're gonna play 10 conference games, we all are, it would benefit everybody. Because then you wouldn't have some teams playing 8, some playing 9. And then there are teams that are gonna be in these conferences that have already scheduled in the future and have 2 Power 5 conference games. That's gonna be tough. So that's something we should do, and here's why I think that should happen. One, because it's gonna make more money, because people are gonna wanna come to the games. They're gonna wanna show up and watch those games. 2, TV wants that. They wanna show games, people wanna turn the TV on and get their viewership ratings up. And then we would have parity amongst the conferences in, when we decide who makes the playoffs. We can't say, well, they played 8 and played 3 teams that were way below their level, and this conference played 9 and they played 2 Power 5s. And it would create some parity and it would help at the end of the season, in my opinion.
You think this is all headed toward NFL life, basically? No matter what conference, they're gonna just take the top 30 to 35 and
I think it'll be more than that, but I think it's going that direction.
what's your timeline on
But
that?
you know who has to agree on it? TV.
That's,
they're the ones that have
I
to
assume
agree
they'll be
on
the central players in that.
We'll go ask them. They're the ones making the decisions.
What, 5 years maybe?
Mm,
What'll be your over-under number for that?
3.5. I think that, I'm thrilled for where we're at Oklahoma State, but I think at some point, there'll be some things that come up that people don't think about when money gets in their way. And all the different hours and travel, and I think it might be an issue, and they might try to localize it a little bit more.
Coach, if there's a continuation of NIL, do you see a point where, thinking about the NFL model, where there's a salary cap and all those types of things that we see in the professional ranks, or do you think that's even on the radar?
It'd be unfair for me to even guess. I mean, gosh, I've said this before, but, we're driving down a road with a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit, and we have somebody that's radaring us, we're driving 55 and nobody's getting a ticket. So everybody just keeps driving 60. And that's what's happening right now in the NIL. And until somebody comes up with regulations, I don't see us ever getting our arms around it, because people wanna win. And when schools wanna win, or a donor or a booster wants to win, or an athletic director wants to win, or a president wants to win, they're gonna do whatever it takes to win. Because we've tried to somewhat put a cap on this over the years, and it doesn't work. You have one school that has money that's not doing good, and then they'll go out and pay a coach $9, $10, $11 million a year to come in and help them win, and they're fine, as long as they win. So as long as it's gonna be that way, I just don't see us ever getting a hand on it.
I don't wanna spoil the festivities here and the subject matter at hand, but,
You wanna talk about football?
yeah, you've had 4 practices, 2 in shoulder pads now, where there's been that thud, limited amount of hitting, you don't take them to the ground. You get an idea for the personality of your group at this stage?
We had good practice today. Now it was cloudy, and we had a nice breeze, and that contributed some, in my opinion. We had 5 NFL scouts there today, that contributed some, in my opinion. And then we had our extreme camp with 100 or so people there watching, and I think that contributed. But today we had a really good practice, very physical, a lot like what it needs to be in order for us to be a better run football team.
Mike, you mentioned his name earlier, but Utah's coach, Kyle Whittingham, how well do you know him? You guys have both kind of been at your same spot I forget if you're 3 weeks ahead of him, or he's 3 weeks ahead of you in terms of when you were hired, but how much have you got to know him over the years?
I have not crossed paths with him much at all. I bump into him out in Arizona at the meetings out there when we have them in the spring. But we hadn't really recruited against each other much. We've been in Utah a little bit, but we just haven't crossed paths a whole lot. But obviously, I get a chance to get to know him and, the other coaches, so.
Mike, is this the least amount of, with regard to game, guys having game experience, is this the least definition you can ever remember having at the quarterback position going into a season? It's the least I can remember.
So you had, the year that Drew and Spencer were competing, Drew played in Hawaii, but had never played for us. And so you have really kind of the same situation. Bowman's played at Tech, but never really played for us. And the other two have played like 3 or 4 games each, maybe, or in 3 or 4 games each, so pretty minimal at this point. And Bowman hadn't played in this would be the 3rd season, right? 3 seasons.
As you watched him, I mean, and now we're in fall camp, but in the spring, it looked like he was shaking rust off. I mean, he looked dramatically different the last 3 practices of spring than he did the first 3 or 4.
So yeah, some of that was learning our system. I mean, it takes time. I mean, he's done a fantastic job of learning our system, but happens so fast that, reaction's gonna be slower than it would be if he had been running the same plays he'd been running at Michigan probably. So that's why, in my opinion, you saw some of that, and then he got a little better, and he's in a pretty good position right now.
So opening night, he's your guy?
What's that?
Oh, on opening day, is it, you expect it'll be Bowman?
Well, I don't suspect it'll be any of them right now. They're all sharing reps. I'd like to make a decision, practice 12 to 14, somewhere in that area. But the younger quarterbacks are improving, and they're making plays, and we might play multiple quarterbacks. If there's 2 guys that deserve to play, we'll play both guys. If there's 2 guys if one guy takes the job, we'll play one guy. But if 2 guys deserve to play, then we're gonna have to play 2 guys.
If there's a second guy who gets game reps, is it because he's maybe a better athlete and can give you a different look?
Not necessarily. I mean, really, like, I'm watching every drill and team rep from practice. So I can be involved when it gets to that point. We're gonna have to try to decide where we start at and divide up reps at running back. Even though they rotate in more, and then quarterback. So I feel responsible. I think it's my responsibility to be in there with them all through preseason training, which is what I'm doing now. So I get a good feel for it. And I watched all the tape from this morning already, and I don't see anybody. I see guys that are playing really good, and we could have guys that are good enough for us to win with, but there's not one that's pulled far enough ahead for us to say this is the way we're gonna divide up reps yet.
A year ago, you were coming off a spring where you had maybe 8, 7 offensive linemen finished. They weren't, and even some of those guys were limping. And you talked about having 20 guys in fall camp. And I think you did, but you have 22 this year. 16 scholarship, and I don't think there's one out there that's under 6'4". They're all big guys. How do you feel about that group?
We've been fortunate at this point. We still have a number of guys that are just kind of rotating in with our young group, which is really good for us. And it allows us to practice more physical, and that was one of the issues we had the last couple of years. We were beat up at that position, so then you concern yourself with how physical can you practice. Show up on game day and you don't have enough guys, all of a sudden you're not very good anymore. And that hasn't been an issue so far in the spring and up to this point. We practice pretty hard right now. That's gonna help our team.
Bowman being 24, MBA from Michigan, I hear he's married. Does he bring a different just background to the team? Do you sense that about him, and just that he's lived some life?
Yeah, he's mature, sees things a little different. The older we all get, we think things through in most cases, and the other part of our life kind of goes behind us, and you can kind of see that with him. Like, he comes in, I was in the weight room a few mornings ago, and he comes in and he's got his hair all, I don't know what, he combs his hair, and it's kind of wet back, it's all fixed good, and he had a backpack, and he kind of looked like Opie on his way to school, like a real mature, he's like, and he's smiling and high-fiving people like he does, And some of the other guys that are in their first or second year, you know, they're showing up and their hair's all messed up, they just rolled out of bed, you know, breath stinks, you know, and they're just trying to make it. And, you know, he's been up, he probably drank, I don't know if he drinks coffee, but he might have already drank coffee. And so he's got a little different approach, just being older.
How do you find that managing? You see this in the NFL where you've got guys that are, 10 years age difference. Now in the college game, you've got 23, 24-year-olds that are on the same team as 17, 18-year-olds. How do you as a coach kind of manage, 5 or 6 years of age and development?
I've never really thought about it much from my perspective. There could be a difference in a position coach and how he handles them. That'd be a good question for our position coaches at some point. They might have to handle that differently. But for me, I have to see them all the same. And unless I'm in a setting with them in my office because of something outside of football, I have to kind of see them all the same.
Like you, down at the Fiesta Bowl, after you beat Notre Dame, you said you guys could become a blue by 18 months later. Are you nearer to that status, further from that status? Has the realignment changed any of that stuff? How do you see that?
I think what's interesting with that is once all the realignment started, we were always in demand. So now whether that makes us a blue blood or not, I don't know, but I never felt like Oklahoma State was in danger of not being in a position to generate a lot of money, or not generate a lot of money, I should say, with our football program. And so I think that when you look at the prospects of the direction that we go, or we can go, and where we're at, and the success we've had over a 12, 15-year period, we've sustained a lot in our organization also. And we're selling out luxury seating, we're selling out suites, and I think we're gonna sell out our seats this year, our season tickets. We're gonna be close, which is a tribute to our fans, obviously, and the people that are on board and jumping in and helping out. But there's a business side, as you know, you do a lot of research and on things, articles that you write. There's a business side to being a blue blood also. I'm not gonna name any names, but we could come up with 4 or 5 teams across the country over the last 6 or 8 years that didn't play up to what they're supposed to based on who they are, but they still generated and revenued a ton of money, so they're still in that category. And I think we're slowly but surely working our way up here with the direction we're going. I don't know for sure, but like, I always just kind of watch luxury seating sales and ticket sales because I'm kind of responsible for that. And I think we're like 1 or 2 suites away. We're sold out, aren't we? We're sold out. So when you sell your luxury seats and your suites and your people are coming to watching the games and you're in demand in conference realignment, you're moving closer to being in that category would be the best answer I could give you.
You're about to hit 50,000 on ticket sales for only the 3rd time.
So, right. So
You didn't do that with like, some great teams, so it does speak to the.
Yeah, I think that, obviously that's a plus, and, Oklahoma State is a unique, group. And I think the people, the fans, want to help and want to be a part. And as conference realignment started scaring people across the country in the last 18 months, I think they wanted to be a part and wanted to say, hey, football is important to Oklahoma State. We're buying our season tickets. We're gonna do our part. And I just kind of feel that way. And so, and this is proof of it by them getting out and buying their tickets because, we all know the issue that we face is they can sit at home and watch every game. It's too easy to watch every game. I lost Wi-Fi, or not Wi-Fi, I had Wi-Fi. Have y'all ever had Wi-Fi at your house and the internet not work? Well, I didn't even know that was possible. I thought if you had those 3 things on your phone that everything worked. Well, I had the little 3 the waves on my phone and I had no internet. I didn't know that's possible. Well, I didn't have any, so my TVs won't work. So I was able to pull up TV on my phone because my kid showed me how to do it.
But you don't watch TV.
No, but here's what I was watching, okay? Well, I'm gonna tell you when it was. It was 4 days ago, but no, it was a weekend. It was last Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So what do you think I was watching? You have to be
Baseball,
nice.
golf, I don't know, one sport, whatever sport was on.
Right, so I was just watching a little golf, okay? And anyway, this is one of the issues you have with, selling tickets. So I could watch anything I wanted on my phone, so people can just stay home and watch everything, you know, if they don't wanna get in their car, drive, park, go in the game. But we've done a good job here with our concessions, you know, they've done a good job in making it more of a fan experience, and obviously we've redone the stadium, we're gonna do the other side. Those things are all important.
Last question, so we can stay on schedule.
You're kind of a younger football team, or at least a new football team with the transfers coming in. Over the last 4 practices, maybe even what you've heard from Rob over the summer, besides the guys would be natural, like Brennan Presley, Colin Oliver, who are some guys that are emerging to be leaders within the group?
You know, I think that, I think Nick Martin's, trying to play that role. Benson is trying to play that role. You know, we were kind of familiar with Preston. Bray is trying to play that role, watching him practice.
Nixon, running back?
Yeah, he doesn't say as much. Walter Shee is trying to play that role. So we've got some guys that are trying to step up and keep the things together. You know, a lot more than 2 weeks after you've been out there for 15 practices and they're hot and tired and all that. That'll be the real telltale sign.